Hey, I'm Scott.
And I'm Chris.
And this is Doxalogic, where we help you think with your Bible.
Hello, hello. It is a new year, but not a new mailbag in the sense that we're doing the same thing we always do, getting Chris and Scott to answer your questions.
And Bree.
Yes.
You know, I don't
Some
know if
say
I really
the people.
answer them.
No, you do.
The people want to hear you, Bree.
Yeah.
They're glad that you're here, so we stop talking as much. I'm pretty sure that's it. They're like, she can just give us the answer in one sentence and gets you to stop talking. That's a win.
It is great when we go 5 or 6 minutes and you have like a sentence or two, and we're like, yes, that is the summary.
I would say it's important that you guys as pastors answer the questions and I can just summarize for us lay people.
It's
You guys,
helpful.
you
We're a
guys
team.
speak for
It's
a
a team.
living and read for a living, so you have a lot of words, you know?
That's fair.
There's a lot of words in there.
Fair.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
You guys, are you ready to jump in?
Yes.
Great.
For better
do
or
it.
for worse.
And
Let's do
my
this.
iconic phrasing, the first question reads like this. Is it okay for a Christian to pursue wealth? If so, what would it look like to do so with godly ambition?
I immediately think 1 Timothy
Okay.
would be kind of a guiding verse for that. 1 Timothy 6 is going to be my text that I would kind of go to. Again, this is just kind of right as it's coming to me as I'm getting the question. Verse 17, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. So it doesn't address whether or not the pursuit of riches is a good or bad thing, but it does say there are rich people,
Yeah.
and the rich have a responsibility to handle those riches in a godly way. And I think this provides a really good framework for that. I think pursuing riches ultimately is a really difficult thing to say, yep, you can do that without a whole bunch of snares on other sides. You know, I think of the love of money is the root of all kinds of evils, right? And so
I like that you pointed at Chris. For that.
yeah, because he loves money so much.
Sorry, Scott, keep going.
So much.
And so you think about the impact of money, the pursuit of money. What happens a lot of times is it can start with a good intention, like why would you want to make money, and how could you make it make sense from a Christian's perspective? You could say something like, man, I just want to be a generous donor to the church, or I want my money to contribute to reaching an unreached people group, or
Kingdom building endeavors, ministries, schools.
Yeah, translations of scripture into different
translations of
languages
scripture.
and those kind of things. And so those are noble ambitions. We're called to work heartily as unto the Lord. So with whatever you've been entrusted, it's from God, right? 1 Corinthians 4. And so we ought to do that with everything we have. I think of like Ephesians 6 when it's talking about kind of the mentality of the worker and what they should do, the servant. And so you would probably, I think to summarize it briefly would be to say you would have to be very, very careful on assessing your motives as you pursued wealth. I don't think wealth should ever be an end goal, but I don't think it's wrong to give your best as unto the Lord in your work. And if your work happens to bring in a lucrative amount of money, then I would say, okay, at that point, direct yourself to like a 1 Timothy 6, 17 to 19 and really anchor yourself in what this is saying. Be rich in good works. Don't set your hope on those riches, right? And I think that even as you accumulate riches, you have to be really careful of that. So can the pursuit of riches be idolatrous? Absolutely. But it's not necessarily wrong to realize, hey, I can make a lot of money in this, have a noble ambition in that. But man, to keep that a noble ambition is going to require so much of the Lord's help and the community of God's people's help and those kind of things to really stay dialed in on that.
One thing that comes to mind is how difficult it is to actually define what wealth means. What does the person mean by wealth? Is it an exact dollar amount? I think we could recognize in different parts of the world it means very different things, right? The idea that you make even a few $100s a day in some parts of the world would be astonishing wealth. And so
everyone here is considered amongst the wealthiest in the world of all time, right?
Right. And so recognizing what the definition of financial wealth even is tricky and just inherently subjective, because what's your background, what's your thought about that? Is that a size house? Is that a number of cars or types of cars or what it is? So there's so much, not to mention the second home and all the things. And so I would just caution the person who's saying I'm going to pursue wealth in a godly way. I would say pursue vocation and pursue serving the Lord in whatever He's gifted you to do. And if there are some minds, as God has made them, that has a spectacular capacity to tap into that which does produce a lot of money, creating businesses and then selling those businesses and continuing entrepreneurship, not to mention certain fields that just inherently, and I would say rightly so, given their expertise, they make a ton of money. So be cautious about pursuing wealth as opposed to pursuing what the Lord would have me to do to impact the world for good, meaning God's glory. I would say also for this person thinking about this, read the book of Proverbs with a pen in hand. I literally did this years ago, and I'm looking at some of the verses where I read the whole thing and put, you can do this with several symbols, but put a money sign next to every verse that has to do with money. You'll be astonished at what the summary of Proverbs will give you. Now, granted, they are Proverbs, right? So Proverbs 10:4, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Again, defining rich, but the idea that just as a proverb, standalone proverb, it is true that those who are diligent, which is going to come with probably cautious stewardship and things like that, you will end up better off than those who are lazy and slack-handed. That's just one of many, many verses in Proverbs. So wisdom also promises a kind of wealth, but I would argue that wealth is actually much more than financial. There's a kind of life wealth that doesn't have to do just with the size of home that you're in, has to do with the relationships that you have, has to do with the quality of life that you live, with the life God gives you. So I'll stop there, but a couple of summary thoughts.
Yeah.
Great.
I think generally speaking, that kind of hits a good basic answer, and just recognizing that wealth is not a bad thing, but it comes with a lot of dangers, and the Bible's really, really clear on that. So Proverbs is helpful, but also just even thinking about the rich young ruler, and then what comes after that about how difficult it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven, you know?
I preached, you preached 1 Timothy through the whole book. 1 Timothy 6, you preached it, so you could go and find it. It was called... The sermon series was called what again?
The series on 1 Timothy. No, it's the quote from Charles Spurgeon, which was...
Well, no, what I'm asking is if someone wants to go and listen to a sermon...
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to give you the title of it.
Oh, yeah. Come on, Bree. Help us out.
I'm looking it up. Hold
House Church.
House Church.
The dearest place on earth.
The dearest place on earth.
The dearest place on earth.
That's why I was saying it's a Spurgeon quote.
So I happen to preach on just 1 Timothy 6, like 3 through 10, in the Hijacked series, Hijack 2.0.
I remember that.
Back in 2020. That's going to talk about a throwback, right? But you preached it in the book that we did, the series that we did. I preached it in 2020, Hijack 2.0. So, and I called money a dangerous good. I just remember that in the sermon.
It's a good way to put it.
It's a dangerous good, like a fire. Fire is a dangerous good. A knife is a dangerous good.
Right.
You can fill in the blank with why I'm comparing those three things, money and fire and a knife, because you can see how they're dangerous, and yet definitely there's a good. God made them or gave them to us. And
you have to be so careful, because Jesus also is like, hey, listen, what gain is there if what profit is there is if you gain the whole world and forfeit your soul? And so there's definitely components of you can't serve both God and money. So I would say make God your ultimate end, right? Money's not a bad thing. If you have an opportunity to use that, just understand it to be a dangerous good and use the principles of Scripture to help hem you into what that should look like. So
like... Mo money, mo generosity.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bree.
And richness of good works. And in the words of, who is that? Mo money.
I don't know.
We're having trouble with recall right now. Let's not bother to look that up. But all right.
Thanks, guys. Okay, next question. Should Christians listen to secular music?
I think
Speaking of.
anytime you have a question where you say should they listen, I think that's not like a yes they could you imagine me saying yes you should listen to secular music? It's more like a permissible thing, right? Is it permissible to listen to secular music? Because I could never be like, yes, here's what I think today on Doxalogic. You should.
And if you're not, start
if you're
today.
not, then
Right.
start today. Yeah. Then we give some suggestions and we go around. And Chris, Chris
Obviously,
looks like a
that's-
Beach Boys guy, in my opinion. What's he?
Unnecessary. Just got to wear black, all right? Like the two of you. I'm a little more exciting over here than.
That's exactly my point.
your little
That's exactly my
hoodie on.
point.
I'm plenty
Jiminy
exciting.
Christmas. Can I say something?
Sure.
What?
No, I'm just kidding.
About the Beach Boys?
They're the greatest band
About
of
se-
all time.
About secular music and the Beach Boys. I would categorically just maybe challenge just the idea. What is secular music? What do they mean by that? Because there are beautiful pieces of music, whether they're instrumental or include voice, that are not
Overtly
they're
Christian.
not overtly Christian. They may or may not have been composed by Christians. So we look at classical and instrumental piano music.
Sure.
I love listening to instrumental piano, instrumental guitar while I'm studying or something like that. I think that's great. But is it a non-believer? It's plenty likely that it is, and it's just a song that they literally put together. And so I would challenge what secular music means, in part because there's some really bad Christian music.
Yes.
There's some stuff that gets passed as Christian
fair,
music
yeah.
that is straight up heretical.
Right.
And so
Far more dangerous than listening to
which
classical
is
music.
far more
Yeah,
dangerous,
yeah.
it turns out, because you're being fed something, you're being told is Christian music
Yeah.
that is using the words Jesus and God and things, and it is importing all sorts of, literally heresy from some of the biggest bands in the world right now. But that's also been true for decades. Let's be clear. So I would kind of like caution, like, what's the opposite of secular music?
Mm-hmm.
Is the opposite of secular music Christian music? That's the categorical. I think it's there's a bit of a fallacy there of just assuming that. And then I would just say, secular music, which is derogatory or tearing down God's standards, or is promoting a type of idolatrous, sexually sinful, whatever lifestyle, you got to be very cautious with that. But you can't deny certain catchy tunes that if you know them, you know them. It's not like some heinous thing. So
Yeah, and I think music shapes the mind in a lot of ways. So you really have to make sure you understand the level with which you're engaging in music in general, right? It's different when you're listening to instrumental music because you're not listening to words, for example. But our minds are so moldable,
Right.
and we're memory oriented, and the image bearer in us moves towards imitation. In fact, that's such a huge piece of discipleship, is imitating someone who's your discipler, like Paul's saying, "Follow me as I follow Christ," and those kind of things. And watching what you take in inevitably has an effect on you. And so I think you do have to be really, really careful about what you take in. And I don't think this necessarily is across the board the same application for every Christian. But I think the same general application would be to say you need to be very careful with what you take in, and you need to make sure you understand that, like, music preaches, especially the ones with words, and you've got a completely different agenda coming your way. And I think it's important too, even for your kids as they grow up, but instead of just like a lot of times, just going, no, I won't do any of that. Like, engage with some of that stuff, especially as you're trying to disciple someone through listening to music. Like, hey, let's pause this for a second. Let's break this down. What is different between this and a Christian worldview? Right. What are they undermining here, and what are they saying? And hopefully you're letting the sweetness of Christ and the kind of foulness of this also lean your music listening in a particular direction as a result of that, right? But I would say that it's not a one-size-fits-all direct application for every single person.
Yeah.
And last thing on my mind would be that all beauty kind of is God's beauty in terms of, like, God made beautiful things. He continues to make beautiful things. And when image bearers make beautiful things, as in beautiful music, there's an appreciation that can be from the Christian absorbing that, be appreciated, be especially when it's an incredibly like talented either solo artist of something. If you're in a performance or at a performance you're watching, it should bring glory to God in your own heart, whether or not that person's doing it at, you know what I'm saying, in their heart, whether they know it or not. The music that they're producing is I think the glory of God is in that to a degree, because it's beautiful, and so it can be appreciated. But walk with caution. But I would argue, as I already did, from the Christian side of things and how treacherous some of that can be, you walk with caution with everything you listen to.
Yeah. But probably a little less caution with the Beach Boys.
They've been around long enough. Less caution.
They're so
less
happy.
His shirt looks like the ocean. Now that I think about it.
Someone's going to get on the video because you said that, and they will disagree with you, Scott.
No, I think it is. You've got like sand colors.
It's like I'm wearing a Hawaiian
blue.
shirt. Am I wearing a Hawaiian shirt?
Yeah,
No.
close. It's close.
I just can't. I can't, and I'm not gonna.
Good for you, Chris.
Thank you, Bree.
All right. Next question. This is 2 questions in one submission. So, why did God tell the Israelites to go and kill certain groups of people in the Old Testament? That's the first question. Why did the favor of God only rest on certain nations pre-incarnation?
Certain nations.
Yes.
I would go
it's
to
interesting question.
Deuteronomy 7.
Yep.
Because that's
On that
a
second part.
good just founding place. I mean, God's favor really rested on the nation of Israel.
Uniquely.
Yeah.
I'm here, and I'll
Okay.
read that here. Deuteronomy 7:6 and following. God speaking to Israel, "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen." Sorry, I was going to say, I think Moses is speaking here, but on behalf of the Lord. "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth." This is key. "It was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love on you and chose you. For you were the fewest of all peoples. But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers, that the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Know therefore the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments." I'm going to stop there, but he's referencing, Moses is referencing there Abraham, the Abrahamic covenant, when he talks about your father. So Israel has come out of slavery to Egypt. They've also wandered about 40 years in the desert. By the time Deuteronomy comes, Moses is an old man. It means second law, the second giving of the law. And he's telling this new generation throughout the book of Deuteronomy, as they're getting ready to go into the promised land without him. Also, he's going to die before they go in, reminding them it was not because of your greatness or your size, maybe say importance, but it was God in his own electing.
Or your righteousness.
Or your righteousness. In other places, we get that very clearly. It was his sovereign electing will that they would be, let us remember also, a kingdom of priests. Their designation was to be a kingdom of priests as a witness to the nations, that they were to operate in faithfulness to show the nations the true God, the worship of the one true God, and so to actually make a case that the other gods are false gods, and this is the one true God, to actually welcome people to come in to the religion of the Jews, to believe in Yahweh without being Jewish. That was part of the purpose of Israel in the Old Testament, which they massively failed the vast majority of the time, the need for Christ. But just to say that their purpose was not just God making them special, like too bad for all of you. It was actually
a come and see thing.
It was a come and see thing, a kingdom of priests to show to the nations around them the worship of the one true God.
Yeah. And then just the law actually explains a bit of this, and the answer is because they're idolaters. And idolaters, as we know in the book of Revelation, for example, have their place in the lake of fire. But in Exodus chapter 22, verse 20, I think we can simplify it down to this. I mean, whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. And so this isn't anything unusual in terms of the severity of God's judgment. God will judge all of those who are ultimately commandment breakers, right? This is first, second commandment kind of stuff, having other gods that you worship and serve. And then when you think about the piece of, they were saying other nations, I would say the closest to like other nations having favor, with Israel having unique favor, would be the blessings and curses that were in a part of the Mosaic or the Sinaitic covenant. And you see that in Deuteronomy 28 and following, sort of you will be blessed if you bless Israel and its people, and you will be cursed if you oppose Israel, as a nation.
Which was also part of the Abrahamic covenant.
Which was
well.
also right. It goes back to Abrahamic covenant because, of course, So exactly. So it continues to kind of progress through redemptive history in this way, and so nations would be blessed. That would bless Israel. Those kind of things. And so by proxy of that, you could see some sense of other nations being blessed. But I think that distinction that you made at the beginning, Chris, was helpful. And then ultimately, the promised land, when I think of like it being in a sense a type of eventually the new heavens and new earth, you go to the book of Hebrews, it talks about entering the rest that Christ has for his people. And we know that rest ultimately for eternity will not include those who are idolaters, who are those who worship false gods and reject the one true God. And so there's a consistency that God is being the same. And the fact that they're devoted to judgment, or judgment comes at that time, it's for the Lord's to appoint when that and how that judgment takes place. But it's certainly a picture of the ultimate judgment and the final judgment that will come in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Leviticus 18 would be helpful for this person to maybe think about reading from the words of the Lord himself about just how abominable, just how idolatrous, just how heinous these particular nations were in the Promised Land when it comes to the nature of their sin and the ultimate by God's decree decision, and God creates and God gives life and God takes life. That's been true forever. It's still true today. But the idea of just how awful these nations were is often misunderstood or minimized, I would argue, by people that have they feel a moral struggle with what they read in the Old Testament. And if you only read certain narratives without the explanation from the Lord of what their sins were like and how far gone they were, like the depravity, it's hard to even put words to it when we find out what kind of life they lived, and their refusal to change, their refusal to believe in Yahweh, and their commitment to name the different gods that were sacrificed to, child sacrifice. That it was his justice needs to
Rampant wickedness
needs to be upheld as God's justice. Like it or not, we need to accept it, and ultimately we should give praise to God for it, because it is also something that he's going to be consistent with in eternity regarding heaven and the expelling of all wickedness, and anything not according to his will, unbelieving, will no longer be, and we ought to look forward to that.
Yeah, it's a sober warning, and it's a call to confess your sin, forsake your sin, and place your faith and trust yourself to the Lord Jesus, his person and his work, to be delivered from that sin and to be assured of eternal life that Christ merited in his own work, in his own life's blood, purchased for us who believe. So that's what I would kind of say in the...
And lastly, part of the reason Israel got driven out of the land by Assyria in the north and then Babylon in the south was that they participated and became just as the nations and became as wicked as the nations and lost the land. Now they were judged and they were restored, right? God's promises to Israel were not failing in that moment, right? He didn't treat them exactly like those other nations, but they were driven out of the land. Deuteronomy, the threats, God wasn't joking around. And they were as the other nations in their idolatry and their wickedness.
So in the end, it provided no cover to be a part of Israel unless you were of true Israel, circumcision of the heart and not of the merely of the flesh.
Right.
That's a really helpful explanation, guys. Thanks. Let's move along here. Next question. In Hebrews 13:2 talks about showing hospitality because some have, quote unquote, entertained angels unaware. Is that a reference back to the Old Testament? For example, Lot welcoming in the strangers who turned out to be angels. Or is it speaking of us today and indicating that angels walk among us?
Good question.
couple things on that. There is reference in my cross references in my Bible to Genesis 18 and 19. So there is a sense in which the compilers here are putting together that link or that connection. I think we probably, so some people go over the top with angels, right? They attribute blessing to angels everywhere. And that can get a little bit, it feels a little religious. It feels a little bit that they're just kind of making that up. Like, oh, just angels are just around. They were around the hospital bed. They were, this kind of thing. I just heard it in multiple different ways. But I think the more you read scripture, the more you understand that actually angels are doing God's bidding and working in the world and involved in some sense in the church. And one of the ways you see that is in the book of Revelation 2 and 3, there's a messenger for every church. Well, the way you translate messenger is angel. And so it's possible that there's some sort of protective, representative, angelic influence over
specific churches,
like
churches,
assignments
right?
of Christ's church. And so that aspect of the invisible realm, so like I can read that out of Revelation.
Well, you
too.
find that, Scott. I would just say this about Hebrews 13:2. I think we should accept it on the face of it. We shouldn't be embarrassed about it, but we're also not instructed here or anywhere else to dogmatically try to figure it out. You know what I'm saying? Like become, and this is how you discover if it was
How
an
you
angel
find-
or not. If this is how you know, you just did the thing that was talked about here.
Case in point to the
hospitality.
verse, you'll entertain them unaware, right?
Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and you're not told to try to become aware. You're
Yeah.
just told to just understand that the world that God has made is quite, I think the word that comes to mind is enchanted.
Yeah.
We've talked about like losing enchantment with God's created and spoken world that he runs. This is my Father's world.
Yeah.
So the scientificism or the scientism, the Enlightenment, the postmodernism is just largely kind of eliminated the thought of what the biblical worldview, which includes the spiritual and the physical, and the spiritual interacting with the physical many times without our awareness. And we're not told to like pursue the knowledge of something that we may not be given to know, but we can confidently take the words for face value.
Yeah.
And we know they have specific assignments at times. That goes back to Genesis 18,
Yeah.
19.
Old and New
specific
Testament.
assignments
Yeah.
that the Lord gives angels to be a part of, but we also understand that, Christ is the image of the invisible God, Colossians 1:15, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. So when you're talking about this, Chris, this enchanted world, obviously it's things that are created. You can go home and see your dog and realize it's an enchanted world, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing to watch live animals like just do their thing that God's designed them to do, but then also the invisible realm in which angels are very much a part of that. Now, when you get to the book of Revelation and Jesus has a word for 7 churches, each one of them starts to the angel of the church in Ephesus, right? Okay, to the angel of the church in Smyrna, right? To the angel of the church in Pergamum, and on we can go. And so evidently there are specific assignments and work that the angels are doing on behalf of God's ordained will that, to your point, Chris, we don't need to go hunting down, but we can have confidence in that the Lord is doing whatever he sees fit to do in order to accomplish his plan and preserve his promises, especially unto his people, right? So the idea that like we can be confident that under God's protective provision, not even a hair will fall from our head apart from the sovereign ordaining of God. Man, we have this protection, and part of the means of that protection is angelic in that sense. And so chalk it up to just another blessing that you could go, wow, I should have such a confidence in this life because of the way I can trust the promises, because of the way I can trust God's ministers to be sent on our behalf, and just not over speculate on when and where, and get some angel goggles on to try to figure out who that is, even if they're really, really nice. You're really nice, Chris, like definitely from the Midwest. And if you were super even nicer, maybe angelic, I wouldn't even go there.
Are you an angel? No. So the answer is
Not the first time
both?
I've been asked.
Likely both. Old Testament reference and
We have
indicating-
no reason to think this has necessarily changed or gone away.
Yeah.
We're not told it was going to go away, and we can trust that God's angelic host and his care for his church would include perhaps individual and specific angels to individual and specific churches, and or whatever else God would like to do to organize how angels are functioning in the world. And then the idea that we could entertain angels by our hospitality could be a hospitality in your home. It could be hospitality even in the church. You know what I'm saying? As far as just a warm and welcoming atmosphere, like we don't know, but it's not told to us that we should over speculate.
Yeah, I like that combination. That and don't shy away from it either. Like there's something profound and supernatural going on. But listen, there's a lot of profound and supernatural things going on in moments that maybe to the unbelieving or just watching eye wouldn't see anything, but profoundly something is taking place.
And it's sort of like the idea that right next to you in church, as let's just say, Scott, you are preaching, gospel is preached, someone believes on Christ and goes from death to life. You're not going to physically notice that, probably. It could,
right.
And you may or may not even know that person. They may have told their friend on the other side who I just believed in Christ. I think I got saved today, and you may or may not even know. That's at least as amazing spiritually by God's power, and yet it doesn't have a physical effect oftentimes. And so we just have to realize that the word enchanted or whatever, God's activity, even including his angels, is so phenomenal that we should just be
in awe.
May it draw us to a greater degree of worship and trust in the Lord.
That's so good. Thanks, guys. The last one, the person writing the question gave us a little bit of context, so it's a little bit longer, so bear with me. It reads like this. I have a few family members that believe we shouldn't quote unquote shelter children at all, but allow them complete access to anything online and be in situations that could be traumatic for a child. And all that is needed is a conversation afterwards. Is it wrong that I feel it's important to shield my children from some of the world and to remove my young children from seeing toxic family arguments or watching certain things? How much of the world should parents really be exposing their children to?
Oof. This is
personal.
Yeah, it's personal. It's pretty heartbreaking, we don't always get this much. And so I just want to say to this person, if you're going to watch this, whatever else we may say in this next several minutes, if you go to Doxa, assuming you do, I'd really encourage you to reach out to somebody and not stay anonymous about this. Hopefully you have people around you. And if you don't, you need to get us around you, us meaning leadership and counseling and small group involvement, because listen, that background with your family it's devastating. Yeah. And really, I'm burdened for that person. So to encourage them right out of the gate, your inclination is right. You ought to protect them. The word shelter is it's a ploy of certain. It's a ploy of a certain kind to make you feel guilty for something that is absolutely in your authority and your responsibility under God to do for your kids. And so choose a different word, and even if you can't, and that's what they want to throw on you, live with it. You are a shelter, in a sense, to protect from the world and its influences for a time, obviously. I'm going to assume these kids are under 10. Let's just frame it like that, right? At least under 10, if not even younger. And I just want to say your inclinations are absolutely right.
I think part of the problem in our day is it is stunning how normalized just profound wickedness is.
Yeah.
Like we, without knowing, just think about how much has moved just since we've been alive. I remember days in high school, it was a big deal to even talk about certain subjects now that are like, a dime a dozen. No problem. The culture tends to move and we normalize and we make wicked things okay, right? And we even start to moralize wicked things. And so that's where you get these kind of I don't know which you said it was a ploy. Yeah, it is. It's something like sheltering sounds like almost like a bad thing. It's like what you used to say about homeschoolers. They were just afraid of the world kind of thing. And this doesn't sound like anyone who's afraid of the world in that sense, but you should have a healthy loathing and disgust for worldly things and a healthy desire to want to protect your kids and respect the providence of God and their own human development. That's another thing as well, is that you are accelerating them by having no protection. You are allowing them to progress with things that they're taking in that they don't even have the capacities to understand. You're just moving far past. They don't have any tools to even interact with that kind of stuff. And so I think the picture in Scripture is so clear. There's so many passages you could go to, but Ephesians 5 just jumped off the page to me. Therefore, be imitators of God, first and foremost. I mean, that alone, right? God hates wickedness. God dispels the darkness with light. Be imitators of God. In fact, speaks of children of light, as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But sexual immorality, and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you. We've lost that. That's what I'm talking about. We have lost our ability to blush when it comes to evil things. We've lost the ability to think, man, that's not even something we should be okay to or be comfortable to talk about. Right. It's a certain level of indecent that is just should cause us to be silent. As is proper among the saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure or who is covetous, that is an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words.
Which is exactly what your family is doing. Seeking to deceive you with empty words.
And we're assuming a little bit that sheltering is coming from that conversation, but yes, I could see what you're saying there. For because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not become partners with them. Okay? For at one time you were darkness, but now you're light in the Lord. You're going to preserve the light. You're to walk as children of light. For the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true, and try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. That's what it sounds like they're doing for the record. It sounds like they're trying to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. The Lord is a Lord of light. He is light. We are to walk in that light. But listen to this, verse 11, and I'll call it here. There's more we could say, but take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them, for it is shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret. So I think just with that mentality, you have absolute freedom. And like you said, I think you called it responsibility and authority to make those calls. And here's the thing, as a parent, there's some wisdom that goes into this, and you don't always get it right. But I think when you look back, you will really struggle with the times you were too loose and lenient because you felt like you didn't want to be perceived as a shelter or whatever the term is. And you never want to do this in fear because you're scared. Right. You want to help bring your kids up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord.
Ephesians 6,
which is the next chapter. Yeah, that is appropriate to how they're developing. Listen, you live in a broken world, a sin-cursed world, and so there's no fully keeping your kids protected from everything. That's also just an illusion. That's a pretend thing to think Christian kids could be kept from everything. But what you do instead is you monitor that, you make good, godly, strong at times decisions and protection of your kids so that you can help them work through those things and come to an understanding of not only how to understand what's going on, but how to be wise in the way that you should respond to something, or that your kids should respond to something.
Yeah, there's so much more to be said about that too, just how to really work that out, what you need to maybe do in regards to your family, in regard to if they're local get-togethers, if are they spending alone time with, whether it's an aunt and uncle or whomever. That's again not for us to be able to work out.
Well, because we don't know the situations
sense right now. With what should I do? That's again where you need godly friends, godly counsel.
Because then it goes like, do I not go then see my family at all?
Yes.
And it's like, hey, I can't make that call because I don't know what you're dealing with But are there situations where it would mean that you maybe do take a step back, which is so sad at times if there's that going on. I certainly think that's on the table of possibility depending on what the situation is, and you have to make those calls, and
recognize that assuming that family is non-believers, is lost, there's an animosity maybe coming out of them toward you, but it's ultimately because of Christ.
Yeah.
if they can see how you're living so different and contrary to them, and even raising your own kids so contrary to how they're raising their kids, and then they're gonna heap certain scorn sometimes and name calling, whether it's sheltering or righteous or goody two shoes, whatever it is, and you may need to bear up under that. But this is why I go back to: do you have people around you? Do you have godly counsel in your life? Do you have people that support you and the decisions that you're making and are helping you walk through the specifics, which is what we're just limited on being able to do right now.
That's so helpful. Thank you, guys. Well, let's transition to honorable mentions, and let's start with our usual of what are you reading right now, or maybe any other book you might recommend. Let's help you think with your Bible.
Scott, you got something?
I'm excited. I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I bought this book a while ago, and
Ooh, you have it with you.
I do because I never remember.
That was kind of like a magic trick. You just like pull it out.
If you're watching the video,
Yep.
it's called "Fight for Your Pastor," not "Fight Your Pastor." Written by Peter Orr, and it's a short read. I feel like you guys have some of the more like dense type of academic level reads, so I'm trying to give a little middle ground for our listeners. It's a really good book, and so I feel like being on staff at Doxa for almost 7 years now, I have like a little bit of an insight to not quite understanding, and I never will understand like the full weight of what it is that like your pastor goes through, or like what it is to have the role that they have. And so this book is so good, and I would encourage anyone who just is a member, a congregant member, someone who belongs to a church and is led spiritually by a pastor, to read the book. It helps give a good insight in how to come alongside your pastor. And I think it's easy for us over time to become, not like in a malicious way, but become consumeristic. Like you do a service for the people on Sunday, and that's kind of who you are to them.
Yeah.
And it could be subconscious. It's not like, you owe me something, pastor, but there's so many good little nuggets in there. And the author, it looks like he sourced anonymously some like little excerpts from other pastors. And so insight is so good. It is actually incredibly convicting as a church member myself. It is small.
100 pages or so? I mean, I'm just looking at it like...
Yeah. A lot of chapters.
Chris is hoping you'll all read it.
I'm trying to encourage people to go ahead and get this. Peter Orr, 2 R's, O-R-R.
Yeah.
Fight
for your pastor. Super quick
if you
read.
type in Doxalogic, you'll get 10%. No, I'm just kidding. If only.
Like, I do have an extra copy, so the first person to ask me for it, I'd give it to them.
Those are the boxes of books we should give away to the new people in the church.
Yeah. They're really
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, really
Fight for
short
your pastor.
chapters, really easy read, but like so convicting and so helpful to understand. Like from in a biblical sense, like how you ought to interact with someone who's leading you spiritually. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
awesome.
so good. Yeah.
All right, I spun out to a different topic because of what you just said about all the dense examples. So when you said that, I flipped and I'm like, I got a 7th grade book for you.
Oh.
That I'm going to recommend. The Fallacy Detective.
Ooh.
Okay, The Fallacy Detective has a dog on the front cover. And it's 38 lessons on how to recognize bad reasoning. In the world that we live in today, there are so many logical fallacies. Chris, you've used the term a lot. We use the term a lot on Doxalogic. It's really fun. It's interactive. You have examples. There's answers in the back. Aaron and I did it just as we were learning more about classical Christian education. This was years ago. So this isn't a book I'm reading now, but have read in the past. I just highly recommend get your mind around those 38 main like ways that people, the genetic fallacy, the straw man arguments, all kinds of different ones. Not quid pro quo. That's funny. This or that.
It's not good, but it's not a fallacy.
Tu quo qua is another one. Anyway, so there's just a bunch of fallacies that you can, then they'll give you scenarios and you try to you interact with the book. It's really actually helpful. And for this era of life that we're in, the need for critical thinking, highly recommend it.
Cool.
Get a copy of it. It's a 7th grade, 8th grade level.
Excellent. Cool. Nice. I will say a name of a podcast and an author that I've bought after listening to the podcast interview, and that I'm looking forward to reading it. So I do believe, based on what I've heard, I think this is
he allowed
incredible.
to give a word on that? He's not even read it.
A podcast called
I've done that before.
Base Camp Live, which is like an interview style podcast about classical education. It's really, really good. The topics are wide-ranging. So if you're interested in classical education, but that doesn't have to be your first interest. There's meaning like the reason you would listen to it. It's just all kinds of good content. Basecamp Live. One of their guests was a man named Justin Whitmel Early, Earley, and he's got a couple of books, three in fact. I think his most recent one is called Made for People: Why We Drift into Loneliness and How to Fight for a Life of Friendship. I thought, man, I benefited from the episode so much, I decided to buy that book. He's got another one called The Common Rule, which is about habits of purpose in an age of distraction. And so Justin Early is his last name, Earley, and just really, it was an excellent interview, and I'm looking forward to jumping in.
Those sound awesome. Next segment is what's something you're enjoying right now in life?
Well, I will say all things wheels in my life with my kids right now. We bought rollerblades for my two older kids.
Fun.
And then my youngest, Kate, by the time this releases in late January, she turns 5. She's riding her bike with training wheels still, but really like getting close to getting ready to go without those. And then there's the scooter as well. And but again, she's going to get that for her birthday, or whenever you listen to this, got that. So they all have scooters, got bikes, they got rollerblades, and Dad is just...
You're just skateboarding alongside
I'm
him?
generally just on my bike.
Okay.
I'm walking behind
He's not
them,
hurt yet, so he's not
or
doing
I'm
that
on my
much.
bike. I'm not rollerblading yet. They really want Dad to get rollerblades.
I was like, maybe
and
he's
I'm
on the
like,
scooter.
Dad does not want to get rollerblades because Dad's going to need all the pads,
That's
to
right.
an embarrassing level of what I'm going to need, right? The pads, like, hey guys, being very cautious.
Chris, how'd you break
I'd
your
rather
wrist?
stay on my bike. Yeah, exactly. So I'd rather stay on my bike. But all things wheels right now, around the block a lot. And I'm loving it, but it's just a fun phase we've gone
That's
into.
cool.
Yeah.
I'll go. Give you a second to
Yeah.
think. Luther, my husband, and I like to do at night what we call crafting. So
Oh, I can see Luther crafting.
he's
sure.
such a good crafter. He's doing like
great.
leather working right now, which is like
Oh,
seems-
Man
I was gonna
crafts.
say manly
Man
crafts.
craft, yeah.
Manly crafts.
and
yeah.
I've been making these like little art prints in like pretty frames for like fridge magnets style.
Okay.
So I feel like we like to craft at night, and so that's been really fun.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's fun. I played one sport pretty heavily growing up, so I
No.
felt bad about not getting to all of
No
the
one's
other
ever
things.
heard about it, Scott.
And having
Where'd you go to school?
having
You wanna
shut
tell a
your
story?
mouth.
Go ahead.
Having to
Come on, got him. He can't even keep going. I got Bree too.
okay. So
Finally, one for Chris.
playing any racket sport right now is where we're enjoying life. And what's so funny about this conversation and laughter is I'm so used to this as a preacher.
Yeah.
I could preach and have it being invisible
Yeah.
how
It's like
people
how
are
I feel
responding.
when you make fun of me. You're invisible to me. I just
Exactly.
keep
Okay.
going. It's-
Exactly.
So we're talking
it's good.
pickleball. We're
Yes.
talking
No,
tennis.
tennis. Well, yeah, pickleball
Yeah.
and tennis. But yeah, tennis has been really fun.
great.
I have no experience in it, and I really enjoy not doing the same thing I did growing up.
That's so cool.
That's what I was going to say. That took a long time to say it. Thanks a lot,
Sorry,
guys.
sorry for
excellent.
interrupting, but it was funny. All right. Well, thank you guys for number one, answering these questions and letting us get a peek inside what you're enjoying and what you're reading right now. And thank you, listeners, for submitting your questions. Please continue to do so through the website, doxa.church. Under resources, you'll see our media page for the Doxalogic podcast. You could submit there. And until next time, we'll see you later.
You've been listening to Doxalogic, a podcast by Doxa Church in Rockland, California. To learn more, visit us online at doxa.church.